Appreciate all of you joining us tonight, and welcome to the Fumble Sports early line pregame show for the NFL Championship Week. So excited to talk sports with you and, of course, go through every angle of the two games that we have this weekend. We went from 32 teams over 20 weeks ago, whittled it down to 14, and now we have finally reached the final four. Amazing which four that we have in the NFC. Jalen Hurts, once written off in college, disregarded as an NFL prospect, has all of a sudden turned into an MVP caliber candidate, and he leads his Philadelphia Eagles into a home game against the San Francisco 49ers, led by none other than Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the 2022 draft, who has come and stunned everybody by going 7-0 since he took over the 49ers quarterback job. On the other side, a bit more predictable, perhaps, Joe Burrow, the number one pick in the draft a few years ago, leading his team back to an AFC Championship, and in doing so, facing a very familiar foe in Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So excited to talk about these two games with you. Again, this is the Fumble Sports early line betting show. We look at these games early in the week, what the early lines are from Vegas, and try to give you the analysis, gambling trends, everything you need to take advantage of these early betting lines. But throughout the week, Fumble Sports will be here for you, answering all of your questions, giving analysis, and updating our picks as lines change. As always, we're joined by a team of analysts, the first being Adam at Spotter AJ for those following on Twitter. Adam, I hope you're having a wonderful night. What did you think of the divisional round games? Is there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, actually, the thing that stood out to me is you had three games that really weren't much of a contention, right? I mean, the Jacksonville game got a little bit closer with Mahomes' injury, but, you know, as soon as Daboll chose to go on fourth down in that Giants game and it failed, and Philly went up 14-0, that game was pretty much in hand. Cincinnati pretty much had that game in hand the whole time. So I guess the surprising thing to me was just the non-closeness of these games so far. Dallas and San Fran, I think, other than being a field goal fest, I don't think anyone saw that coming. That was a competitive football game. But I think just the games being a little bit further apart than I thought they would have been.
We'll find out if this weekend's games are a bit more competitive. We're also, of course, joined by a loyal contributor, Lope. That's at JLopeDog for those following on Twitter. Lope, how are you doing tonight? What were some of your reactions to what we saw last weekend in the divisional round?
I'm doing good. The non-closeness of the games, and then a difference in a little bit of just the star power. And I thought the stars came out for sure last week, so it was good to see. But I think this week we got two closer games and two really good matchups.
Before we look ahead and obviously address the two championship games this weekend, I want to do a quick lightning round of reaction with Adam and Lope. Just a few things that I wanted to react to based off of what sports media and specifically NFL media is reacting to. Adam, Lope, we'll start with Adam. Do either of you have any problem with Stefon Diggs' reaction, either on the sidelines or what's been reported, him leaving the Buffalo Bills locker room as quickly as possible and then addressing the issue on Twitter? Curious to know what you both think. Adam, do you think Stefon Diggs was wrong, right? Do you have any issue with it?
Yeah, leaving the locker room and getting out of there, that's one thing. But, kind of going after Allen on the sideline a little bit. And I think Allen handled that like he should have, just, kind of ignored the situation and didn't, add fuel to the fire. But that's Stefon Diggs, right? He doesn't get the football, or if he thinks he's open, he's a very, very vocal wide receiver, right? He fits in that Terrell Owens type mode where he's always open, throw me the ball, and he's a playmaker. Now, he did have, a right to say that. There was a few times where he was open to Allen, didn't get that to him. But, it's been a long season for them. Obviously, the last couple of weeks have been super emotional with DeMar Hamlin. So I think a lot of that builds up to it. He was at the game, the big build up to lose at home, had everything in your favor in this game, even though he did play a hot Cincinnati team. So he's a competitor, but he does, he lets his emotions get the best of him sometimes. So I think, packing up and leaving the locker room right away, I don't have a huge problem with that, but I'm not a big fan of going after your teammates on the sideline.
Lope, how do you feel about it? Are you in line with Adam, or do you feel slightly different?
I'm in line with Adam. I think, like he said, it did remind us a little bit of T.O. and a little bit of blowing up. And, knowing that cameras are always going to be on you when you're on the sideline. It wasn't for that. As far as the regards in the locker room, you'd like to see him take more of a leadership role and bring people up and, do the right stuff and say things, but that's not always how it is. But when it comes to these wide receivers, sometimes they can be divas or act out a little bit. So it's tough to see, but it's something that I'm sure will be addressed by the time the offseason starts, and hopefully they can get it right, because that is a deadly combination when those two are on the same page.
It's interesting you both went in the direction that you did. And part of the reason I wanted to bring it up is I absolutely wanted to rant on this, because this is one of the rare times in which I don't think a wide receiver is behaving like a diva. I actually think the wide receiver is behaving exactly appropriately. What I saw from Josh Allen over the last few days was frankly pathetic. And what I mean by that is I didn't see any fire in Josh Allen. Now, I don't want to call him out as pathetic. That's not what I mean by that. But I expected to see more emotion from him. I expected to see more fight. I really saw over the last few days a Josh Allen that was emotionally exhausted, whether it was DeMar Hamlin, whether it was the course of the season. Obviously, he's been dealing with some injuries that kind of came out about the elbow. We were aware of it earlier in the year, but maybe the significance of that just came out. But I saw Josh Allen as kind of pathetically passive over the last few days. I thought that he was in more Eeyore mode, as I would call it from Winnie the Pooh, as someone who's kind of a little downtrodden, a little down on himself. I didn't see any edge to him. And something I want to see from a quarterback as much as any other player in sports is edge. I actually love when Tom Brady gets angry at his teammates, because if Tom Brady's not, who is? Who's supposed to be that alpha? If it's not Michael Jordan or Tom Brady or the star quarterback, I don't know who it is. And I watched that game between the Bengals and the Bills, and I went, man, Joe Burrow has an edge. Joe Burrow is out to assassinate you, but not just that. He is ego personified. And when I mean ego, I don't mean diva ego. I mean that guy struts around like he knows he's the man. The one issue I may have with Josh Allen right now is he's incredibly talented. He's very likable. But does Josh Allen know that he's the man? And in being the man, you have to be the guy who stands up in front of everybody. And whether it's yells or shows emotion, you've got to be the one. And I actually thought that was Stefon Diggs, not just saying, hey, throw me the ball, but hey, show some life. I saw Josh Allen show way too little fight, I felt, from this past week. And I'm obviously not just talking about the game. Even in the press conference after, I thought Josh Allen was just kind of a snail who went back into his shell. I was really disappointed in that. I think so highly of him. But I think part of the reason that sports media and NFL media has jumped on a completely false narrative that the Bills' window has somehow closed, because it hasn't. That's a ridiculous thing to say, is in part because I think we've lost a little bit of faith and confidence in Josh Allen. We see Joe Burrow as a killer. We know Patrick Mahomes is an all-time great. We see Justin Herbert on the come-up. We see Trevor Lawrence on the come-up. All of a sudden, we're starting to go, is Josh Allen the man when the lights are brightest? I never had that question before, but all of a sudden I am now. In part, I think it's because of the emotional response that he did have to that game. Obviously, that's something we can talk about for a long time, but it's not the only quick topic I wanted to get into before we break down the games this weekend. The other one does have to do with two head coaches who lost this past weekend, who will get a lot of credit and a lot of praise over the coming months. I wanted to do a quick take from Adam and Lope. Which head coach, Brian Daboll or Doug Peterson, do you think is more deserving of Coach of the Year honors? And in this scenario, I am asking you to include what we saw in the postseason. Which head coach between Daboll and Doug Peterson do you think is more deserving of Coach of the Year? Adam, we start with you.
Oh, that's a really tough question. On the surface, as quick thinking, Peterson did a great job recovering from that 4-win start with Jacksonville to get them back in the playoffs, although they were in a pretty weak division. Daboll pretty much had the same team as he did last year, and that team was pretty pathetic last year. He pretty much inherited the same team, didn't really bring any huge playmakers in there, just, brought his coaching staff in and put them in the playoffs and won a playoff game. So, at the surface, Peterson got them turned around to make the playoffs in a pretty weak division. And they did get to the playoffs as a division winner. But I think I'd go with Daboll just because he had the same players that the Giants had last year. Not only did he get them to the playoffs in a very difficult NFC East with Dallas and Philly, but he did go on the road and win a playoff game, even though the game at Philly turned out not the way that he wanted.
Lope, are you going with Daboll or Doug Peterson? Again, this is both the regular season and including the postseason.
Yeah, I'm going Dayball. I like what he's seen. I think he was way ahead of schedule on turning the Giants around to move them where he has. He's doing a little less with, I think, a less talented quarterback and less talented offensive pieces around him. The Giants haven't put that together with them, and I think part of harking back a little to the Josh Allen. Sometimes the effect is when a coach leaves, and I think with him leaving Josh Allen, I think that's where a lot of now mistakes and a little bit of a pullback has happened too. So I think Dable has definitely been more impressive.
We really saw the value of head coaches over the last few weeks. I thought the playoffs and obviously the final few weeks of the regular season, whether it was Brandon Staley and how he handled the playoffs, whether it was Doug Peterson, Dan Campbell, I thought you saw the value of NFL head coaches really emerge. Sometimes I think we discount head coaches. We may give it to coordinators or we may say it's the star player. But I actually think in the NFL, head coach makes a phenomenal difference. Both of them had exceptional years. Keeping the focus on the Giants, another question I'd like to ask the two of you, how would you both handle Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? Both are available in the offseason or both are going to be free agents. You can obviously franchise tag one of them. The presumption is you'll franchise tag Daniel Jones if you can't get a more long-term deal. But I'm curious to know, again, we'll start with Adam. How would you handle both of those players? Do you sign both of them? In which case, do you give them both a long-term deal? If you're the Giants, are you committed to Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? How do you handle that? Adam, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Daniel Jones doesn't fit Dable's system. I mean, Dable runs that Buffalo type. I know he does a running quarterback, but he likes to throw the ball a lot more and down the field. Now, granted, like Lope said, they have a lot less talent on offense, a lot less receivers, but I just don't see Daniel Jones fitting into this offense, what Dable wants to do. So that leaves a big question mark for me. I think Barkley, when he finally got healthy and came back, running backs obviously can't really command the big money that they used to. They try to get it right away after the rookie contract's up, because of the wear and tear that they have in them. But I think Barkley is a dynamic player that you need to keep on this offense. But my really question mark, Daniel Jones, he did show some improvement over the last couple of years and definitely showed some improvement this year. And we know he can run the football, but is it a case that he doesn't have any wide receivers to throw it to? I just don't see the offensive arm and accuracy of him to fit into Dable's scheme long-term with the Giants.
Lope, are you committing to Barkley and Daniel Jones for a long-term or even short-term period of time?
Well, I would say with running backs, you always have to be careful giving them money, especially with Saquon's injured past. So if you can get them to take a hometown discount or player or team friendly contract, then definitely there. But I think the Giants are definitely have to be looking for a replacement for Jones, whether they want to keep him for a year and maybe find a bridge guy, or they're at least taking phone calls on trying to trade for one. They're not talented enough with him to compete with the Eagles. I think the game showed it in all three games this year. I think the Cowboys might still even have an edge on them a little bit. And so I think they have to be at least preparing for a future without him. Whether they have to franchise tag him and go with him for one more year, they need a plan real quick for the future.
For me, Saquon Barkley is kind of the obvious one. If I were the Giants, I'd move on from him. I know that's not the popular thing to say, and a lot of Giants fans will probably hate on me. But the truth of the matter is, running backs don't deserve a second contract. I don't believe in it. I think you draft a running back. If they're in the first round, you get that fifth-year option opportunity. But beyond that, I would not commit to a running back in a second contract. I don't care even if they're a Hall of Famer. At this point, I can't trust that I can continue to wear down those tires and that they're going to be available. I think too many contracts with running backs are based on their last 2 years of production rather than their next 2 years of production. I can see Saquon Barkley doing better than his last 2 years purely because he was injured. But I really think Saquon Barkley, if I'm a Giants fan, I want him back because he's a fan favorite. But if I'm being really smart as a front office leader, I have to believe that he isn't worth retaining, that you can spend that money in other ways, especially when it comes to wide receiver. Because if they do, and I think they will retain Daniel Jones, he needs a lot more weapons at the wide receiver position. Also probably needs a tight end as well. Speaking of that, though, I do think they need to bring back Daniel Jones, but I would not sign him to a long-term deal. I wouldn't sign him to even a multi-year deal. For me, I know that A franchise tag might be very expensive, like $30 million a year. So what? In the NFL, a quarterback may be worth $30 million a year, but I don't think Daniel Jones is worth committing to long term. I think you need to see more of a sample size with him under Daboll. I think there may be a possibility that he is the right guy, but you don't know that right now. The two quarterbacks that made the biggest leap for me this year in terms of how I think of them are Daniel Jones and Jared Goff. And in both circumstances, I go, great, now prove it again next year. If I see it again next year, maybe I give you that longer term deal because you're showing all the upside that I want to see. But for now, I can't commit the dollars because I can't really see you in 2 years being a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. Okay, now that we've looked in the rear view enough, let's look through to this weekend to the NFC and AFC Championship games. Appreciate all of you joining us. This is the Butt Fumble Sports early line betting show. This is where we go through the early lines for the NFL games this weekend, try to give you advice and analysis that will help you take advantage of the lines that have been put out by Vegas before either the lines move or the public starts to put down bets. So throughout the week, our opinions and our picks may change, but this early line betting show is intended to help you get an edge before the public or Vegas starts to manipulate some of the lines. That said, we have had line movement throughout in already these two games, so let's jump into it and break them down. In the NFC Championship game, the San Francisco 49ers traveled to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. That one kicks off at 3 p.m. on Fox. Where I see it right now, Philadelphia is a 2.5-point favorite, and the over-under is set at 46 points. Some gambling trends before we go around and get analysis from everyone. The favorite is 7-3 against the spread in the last 10 meetings between the 49ers and Eagles. The 49ers are 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 playoff games, while the Eagles are 6-2 against the spread in their last 8 playoff games. The under is 4-0 in the last 4 meetings between the two. The under is 7-0 in the 49ers' last 7 playoff road games, and the under is 4-1 in the Eagles' last 5 games overall. Adam, we start with you. This is a mega matchup between two great rosters, the 49ers and the Eagles. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, for sure. Big time football game here. The weather shouldn't be much of an issue. In fact, a little bit unseasonably warm in Philly this time of year in January. 45 degrees, 8 to 10 mile an hour winds. So really not huge concern there weather-wise. This line did open up at -2, 45.5. And like you mentioned, up a half point there and in some spots at 46.5. So not a ton of line movement on this game so far. Philly, obviously, had stumbled to the finish, have not looked that great. But a dominating win over the Giants, 38-7. And like I mentioned earlier, I think this game changed right away with that 4th down decision for Daboll to go for it on the 45 there. Philly came right back down 14-0. I think that game was pretty much over at that time. Hurts did have 3 touchdowns, 2 through the air and 1 running, but not, huge numbers, 154 yards passing, 34 rushing, but he didn't have to. The surprise of the game, I think, was Gainwell. 12 carries, 112 yards and a touchdown. He's pretty much done nothing up until this point. And Sanders, 17 carries for 90 yards. So they pretty much ran the ball all over the Giants. So Hurts was not needed to put the ball in the air a whole lot. They did get behind. The Giants got behind. Jones got sacked 5 times and, had to throw the football up and down the field to try to get back into it. But they still had 118 yards rushing on that sometimes suspect Philly rush defense. San Francisco, on the other hand, had a hard-fought field goal victory for the most part against Dallas. Their defense did force 2 interceptions from Dak, and he only threw for 206 yards. They also held that Dallas rushing attack to 76 yards total combined. They did give up 117 yards, though, to Lamb, which is a little bit of a concern for that tough defense. But for the most part, I think that game was back and forth, for pretty much the whole game until McCaffrey finally broke that open. But I think San Fran, to me, was the better team that game. Dallas was just hanging around, and they were letting him hang around. Purdy, again, efficient, didn't turn the football over. Only 214 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. But obviously Kittle with the big catch, 595, kind of got them going down the road. Like I mentioned, Philly has looked up and down this year, stumbling to the finish. But when Philly puts it together, they are impressive for sure. And, San Francisco on the other side of the coin, they've just been steady Eddie. They've won 10 in a row, and they're just rolling right now. So they're a very, very consistent football team. Like I mentioned, Philadelphia's defense is suspect at times against the rush. And San Fran can really run the football, so I think there's an edge there. But at the same time, this Phillies defense isn't that bad. 4th overall in the league, and they're 1st against the pass. So 16th against the rush, 1st against the pass. You might have a little bit of equation there. But both teams' defenses don't give up a lot of points either. 20 points allowed by Philly and 16.3 allowed by San Fran. So for me in this game, both offenses are very close. You have big-time playmakers on both sides of the football between Smith, Brown, and Goddard's been coming on of late. Of course, McCaffrey, Samuel, and Kittle. I know there's been some questionable players this week with McCaffrey and a couple guys dinged up, but they're all going to play. So for me in this game, I've been riding them all year long, and I know it's what have you seen lately type league sometimes in the betting market. And right now, the public is backing Philadelphia at 77% of the money coming in on the spread with Philadelphia. But for me, I like the better defense in this football game. I like the quarterback who's going to be more efficient, not turn the football over. And I really think San Fran's going to run the ball and control the clock against Philly. So I would buy this up to 3.5, and take San Francisco. And I also would take a lean to the under. Like I mentioned, I think Philly's defense doesn't get enough credit for how good they can be. And I think that everyone's going to look at this and think, San Fran's been scoring over 30 points 3 of their last 4. Philly just, hung 38 points in the Giants. This is an easy overplay. But for me, I'm looking at this one a little bit more ball control. I think the San Francisco's defense is really, really good. I think they're the best in the NFL, and defense wins championships. So that's kind of where I'm rolling with San Francisco here and lean to the under. And just a really quick a couple prop bets, obviously, with coming down to only 2 games. You have to start looking elsewhere other than the line to play. I do like anytime touchdown with McCaffrey at -130. You're also getting a +240 on Goddard. And I know Goddard had a touchdown this past week, and it's been kind of scarce for him in pay dirt, but he's also been getting a lot more action in the offense and more catches the last couple of weeks. So that's a good value there. I do like Devontae Smith over his longest reception of 23.5. He's gone over that number 5 of the last 7 games. And we know that Devontae Smith has been getting downfield, and Hurts has been hooking up with him. So I think that's a pretty good play there too. And the last player prop I have is I do like Hurts to throw an interception in here. You're getting plus money at a +110. And he does have 3 in the last 3 games. And like I said, against this tough San Francisco defense, I think they can force Hurts into an interception. And just a real quick side note aside from this game, talking about the betting spreads and where the public money is going. In the wild card round, the public was 1-6 against the spread with the money going. Last week, the public was 2-2 in the divisional round. And like I mentioned before, heavy, heavy money on Philadelphia in this game. Also, money leaning on the under at 60% right now coming in from the public.
To go to that total note, that first wild card weekend, the over was a popular play. The under struck back with a vengeance in the divisional round. Will be interesting to see how the totals play out this weekend. Lope, what's your analysis for 49ers Eagles?
I'm right in line with Adam. The under is definitely the strongest play, I think, right now. 2 really good defenses and 2 teams that like to do the same thing, run the ball. Very good defensive fronts, and getting pressure on the quarterback, turn you one-dimensional by stopping your run and making you make mistakes. So I think that this is a lower scoring game. Teams will play field position. I'm definitely curious to see what Jalen Hurts can do when he has the ball against a tough San Francisco defense. But I feel like it's going to be lower scoring, something like 20-17 or so. And for right now, I would do what Adam said as well, buy the point up from the 49ers, get it over a field goal, because I think this has a field goal game written all over it. The 49ers are tough. They've been here before. They know what they're up against, even going on the road. And I expect them to give Philly a heck of a game. And I would not be surprised at all if they win it. If the line does go more favor, I might take a side bet with 49ers money line.
One of the reasons I love this game is because on one level, it's incredibly balanced, and yet there are some major distinctions between the 2 teams. Both head coaches have done a brilliant job, probably aren't getting enough credit for the job that they've done this year. But Kyle Shanahan is a bit more stoic. Nick Sirianni is a character. That guy is staring down the camera and strutting his stuff. He is a Conor McGregor wannabe, if there ever was one. He's a riot. So the head coaches, who do I think gives the advantage? When it comes to X's and O's, I'd probably give it to Shanahan. But when it comes to mindset and swagger, how do you not go with Sirianni? Now let's look to the players actually on the field. Arguably the best player on the field is the offensive lineman Trent Williams. He had a phenomenal game against Micah Parsons, allowing just 1 quarterback pressure the entire time against Micah Parsons. Trent Williams, I know Deebo Samuel might be the most athletic, but in terms of who is the best player at their position playing in this game, it's Trent Williams. Interestingly enough, it's probably the Eagles who have the better offensive line as a whole. The same probably could be said about the 49ers defense. I think the 49ers defense probably has some bigger name stars in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, but I actually probably trust the Eagles defense slightly more. I know the stats say the 49ers are the better defense, but having watched the Eagles throughout the year, I think they're a bit more opportunistic and a bit more balanced. That said, Adam brought it up earlier. This game to me in so many ways is about the 49ers are great against the run. The Eagles are great against the pass. So how are these two quarterbacks going to face these vaunted defenses? If you're Brock Purdy, you have to rely on Deebo Samuel, you have to rely on Christian McCaffrey, and you have to try to exploit the Eagles' run defense where they've had problems. On the other side, Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, they're going to have difficulty running up against that 49ers defense that we saw blanketed the Cowboys running game. So expect Jalen Hurts to attack down the field with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and as Adam pointed out, Dallas Goedert. So I really think the two quarterbacks have to fit into the structure of their offense that's going to give them the best opportunity to win. Now, a popular thing that's been brought up, this isn't the first meeting between Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy. In 2019, when Hurts was at Oklahoma, he played Brock Purdy, who was at Iowa State. They had an unbelievable shootout that saw Oklahoma win only because they won by a 2-point conversion that wasn't completed by the Cyclones. But in that game, Hurts went 18 of 26 for 276 passing yards and 5 touchdowns, including 3 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. But not to be outplayed, Purdy went 19 of 30, 282 passing yards, 6 total touchdowns, 5 through the air, and 1 on the ground. So this should be a great rematch of these two players, obviously with better talent all the way around them. But in this one, I have to lean slightly towards Jalen Hurts. I was so impressed by him throughout the regular season. He is clearly the better quarterback in this one. No knock on Brock Purdy, but Jalen Hurts has matured over his time in the NFL. He's such a dynamic weapon, whether it's through the air or with his legs. Another prop bet to Adam's point, or bring up prop bets, Jalen Hurts, anytime touchdown at this point, has been a consistently cashing ticket. I think you'll see him get into the end zone once again. But I so believe in Jalen Hurts that despite my love for this 49ers defense, thinking so highly of Shanahan, and wanting to see Brock Purdy continue this Cinderella story, I think Jalen Hurts and the Eagles will advance, but that's a money line play. As for the spread, I think Adam and Lope are dead on. This feels like a field goal game at biggest spread to me. And therefore, I do like San Francisco to cover after you buy the 1.5. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, whether it's the trends or just the stats about these two defenses, the under is a very popular play for me. So the Butt Fumble Sports pick for the NFC Championship game is Philadelphia on the money line, San Francisco +4 after you buy a 1.5, and the under 47.5 after you buy a 1.5. Again, this is our early line betting show, so if you want to track our picks throughout the week or get our picks right before game time, make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, sign up for the free newsletter. That newsletter comes out on Friday morning with updated picks, updated trends, and obviously updated gambling stats. So make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, sign up for that free newsletter. That newsletter comes out Friday with everything up to date. And again, whether you tail us or fade us, that gives you all the information you need to cash tickets. So whether you agree with our picks or not, you have the information to make a smart decision to hopefully cash your bets. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us at ButtFumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. The next game we're going to get into is the last game of NFL Championship Sunday, which is between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. The AFC Championship game kicks off at 6:30 on CBS. Where I see it, the Cincinnati Bengals are now a 2.5-point favorite as that line has continued to grow in their favor, and the total is set at 46.5 points. Some gambling trends before we go around and break this one down. The Bengals are 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 meetings with the Chiefs, while the Chiefs are 2-8-1 against the spread in their last 11 games overall. The Bengals are 6-1-1 against the spread in their last 8 games in January, and the Chiefs are 0-5 against the spread versus a team with a winning record. The under is 5-1 in the last 6 meetings between the Bengals and Chiefs in Kansas City. The under is 5-0 in the Bengals' last 5 playoff road games. And the under is 6-1 in the Chiefs' last 7 home games. Adam, should be an outstanding matchup between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. Hopefully Mahomes is healthy enough to show us the brilliance we've come to expect. How do you see this one playing out between the Bengals and the Chiefs?
So before I jump into my analysis of this game, I have a quick question for you and Lope, and I'm having a hard time figuring it out. So Cincinnati won at home against Kansas City this year, 27-24. Including the playoffs, Cincinnati is 13-4-1 against the spread this season, 8-2 on the road in 2022. And with Mahomes' injury, why did this line open at -1.5 Kansas City and now swung the other way? Cincinnati has been one of the most publicly backed teams all year long, and Burrow's a covering machine. So I guess I'll put it out there to you guys. To me, I just don't understand why they took this liability of putting Kansas City as a favorite. I mean, you're talking a -1.5 to almost Cincinnati 2.5 some spots. Why did Vegas do that?
Well, it's interesting because I'll give a note to kind of react to that. So as an underdog, Patrick Mahomes is 6-3 straight up and 7-1-1 against the spread. So I actually think Vegas was wary of making Patrick Mahomes an early underdog because given the stats and the history, Patrick Mahomes slays when he's an underdog. So I actually think Vegas kind of set the early line trying to protect itself because Patrick Mahomes has been a cover machine as an underdog. But as the injury report came out, and once Vegas had an opportunity to kind of reevaluate things, also, obviously, early money coming down, I think it kind of swelled to the Bengals side, whether it was because of Mahomes' history or the recent history between the Bengals and the Chiefs that has so favored Cincinnati. I think it swelled towards Cincinnati's side, but I think it was a Chiefs early favorite play, in part because Vegas couldn't tell itself and stomach the fact that it was going to make Patrick Mahomes a starting underdog. I think they wanted to provide a little bit of protection and then let the public money or let the reactionary money swing it in the other direction. Lope, what are your thoughts on Adam's question?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I would say that Mahomes' injury definitely played a huge factor into it. Putting him as a favorite, they did protect themselves a little bit, knowing how popular the Bengals would be, and I would assume that as Mahomes' injury news is coming out, that they were hoping that they would counter from that. But that's really the only reason. I don't think home field advantage would have been that much of a factor in that kind of a swing.
So now that we've answered your question, Adam, what are your thoughts on this game, and who do you think ultimately emerges as the AFC champion?
Yeah, it's interesting on that point of view too. Just that Cincinnati's been such a huge back team, but I think I can understand what you're saying there. What Vegas might have been thinking. So for this game here, a little bit of a weather. It's going to be 14 degrees, 10-mile-an-hour winds, which is going to feel like about 2 degrees out there. So this is going to be a little bit more of a colder game, like we mentioned. It opened at 1.5 Kansas City, 48. The over-unders dropped 2 points to 46.5 in some spots. And obviously, look, we talked about Cincy is now a 2 or 2.5 point favorite in some spots. And this game, to me, is all about Mahomes' injury, right? He got hurt, came back out, was looking really good before he got hurt. Henne had 23 yards in that one drive, looked okay. It was sustainable to get down the field and score and keep minute. Mahomes obviously came back in to finish the game. Kelsey did the bulk of the work in the first half, 14 catches, 98 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's a beast. He's just an absolute beast right now. And they've heavily relied on Pacheco. Pacheco came through, 12 carries for 95 yards with Mahomes' injury. This defense did keep Etienne and Law in check for pretty much most of the game. I know they kicked the field goal at the end to cover and make it a 7-point game, but I think this game really wasn't really that close to begin with. Obviously, Cincinnati with the big win at Buffalo. That one never really seemed to be in doubt. Burrow, 242 for 2 touchdowns and did run for 31 yards. Mixon, really good game, 20 carries, 105 and a touchdown. And Jamar Chase and Hurst also had a touchdown each. To me, the Cincinnati's defense has really been improving, and they've been playing really big in spots. Going to Buffalo and taking down that offense and I know they allowed a rush touchdown to Allen, but no touchdown through the air for Allen is pretty big. And they really shut down, any kind of semblance of running game that they had. And they also did the same thing with Kansas City, earlier in the year. I mean, Kansas City is a very potent offense, but Cincinnati their defense seems to play better in bigger spots. Mahomes, it's a mobility factor for me in this game. Obviously he creates plays, he creates separation, he creates time for himself in the pocket to get big plays down the field and, to get these guys open. So Also it's his push off for throwing the football. What is this ankle going to look like? The high ankle sprain sometimes, depending how much ligament damage is there, you can only tape it up so much, but that's a big push off for him. So is he going to be able to throw the ball deep down the field? If I'm Cincinnati, I try to keep pressure on him, make him throw short and throw to the outside. I take away Kelsey and take away his short interior passes and force him to push off that foot and throw the football to the outside of the field, or try to throw deep balls. It can't feel good to be throwing the ball deep with Mahomes trying to get pressure on his face. Like I mentioned, Cincinnati just keeps rolling. Their defense the last 4 has been great. They have not allowed over 20 points in the last 4 games, so that's something to take a look at. The one thing for me in this game, again, like the previous game, with the weather and with Kansas City, I think with Mahomes' injury is going to take, maybe not score as many points, and Cincinnati will score to a point, and then they'll kind of back off in ball control. I actually like the under in this game, a little bit leaning to the under. The public right now is a heavy 70% on the over, no surprise there. And also, too, 78% right now of the money is on Cincinnati in this game on the spread. We talked about the line movement and the heavy backing from Cincinnati. So I'm going to sit tight on this one and see where this line goes towards the end of the week. I really don't want to play it right now. And I also want to see, you're not going to find out exactly how healthy Mahomes is, right? They're going to say he's fine. He feels great. They're going to say all the right things because you're not going to come out and say he's terrible, he's in pain, he can't throw the football, right? So you're not going to get a really good indication of what you have there. Might get a glimpse towards the end of the week. So for me, I'm going to hang tight on this line right now and see where it goes with the lean towards the under and a couple player props I like. Kelsey touchdown at plus 105. I mean, if you're getting plus money with Kelsey for a touchdown, I think that's an absolute no-brainer. Also, Pacheco at a plus 155. Like I mentioned with him, with Mahomes' injury, they relied on him a lot in that game against Jacksonville, so I could see him getting a touchdown in this game. And on Cincinnati's side of the football, I like Mixon's over longest rush at 12.5 yards. I think that's very doable. I could easily see Mixon breaking off a 15, 20-yard run in this game. And I think Jamar Chase over 24 longest catch or reception in this game. He's gone over that number 2 of the last 3, and we know that Burrow and him have a really good connection. If they can get the ball running with Mixon up the field, I definitely think they can get a shot down the field with Chase to go over that number of longest reception of 24.
Lo, what are your thoughts on this AFC Championship game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs?
I love it. It's a really good game. I'm hoping that it's not the under. I'm hoping for the over. But 9 of the Bengals' last 10 postseason games have gone under. They seem to definitely have a strategy when they play Mahomes. I think the Bengals have beat them the last 3 times they played. So I definitely could see that, but I would like to see Andy Reid and Zach Taylor to open up the playbook. So I'm not confident enough on taking one that way. Definitely with Mahomes' injury, I would be careful, but I thought that I think the Chiefs have the better team. I think they haven't played their best when they played the Bengals, but I still think that they have enough firepower. So I'm gonna roll with the Chiefs, home field advantage. I'm gonna assume that Andy Reid wouldn't put Mahomes in a position where he can't defend himself, and the ankle will be there. And if there's anyone that can create an offense for a limited quarterback, it's definitely Andy Reid. He knows Mahomes and he trusts what he can do. I think that the Chiefs are definitely stout, and they'll be balanced enough to move the football and score enough points. So I'll take the Chiefs on the money line. And one prop bet, the Chiefs have scored first in each of their last 6 home games, so it's only minus 115 for the Chiefs to score first. I'll take that.
This is a conflicting one for me. Patrick Mahomes' injury obviously stands out, but I saw earlier today on ESPN that statistically, inside the pocket, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. So while we built up this narrative that he's so good scrambling, so good on the move, and obviously he is, statistically inside the pocket, he's the most effective, successful quarterback this past season. So I think as much as we talk about Patrick Mahomes being limited, he's only limited if that right arm is hurt. If his right ankle is hurt, I don't think it makes nearly the impact as we're going to make it out to be. Now, that said, Adam brought up a good point. I think this is a big Pacheco game. I also look for Jerick McKinnon, even if it's in the passing game, get the ball out of his hands fast, get your playmakers out in space, put less of the pressure on Patrick Mahomes, at least to sit inside the pocket and have those offensive linemen around him. That said, there are a couple trends that really conflict with me on this one. The Bengals are 8-2 against the spread on the road this season. The Chiefs are just 1-7-1 against the spread at home this season. However, in the past 10 postseasons, a road favorite is only 3-8-2 against the spread. So a road favorite, which Cincinnati is right now, has only covered the spread 27% of the time. And as I mentioned a moment ago, as an underdog in his career, Patrick Mahomes is 6-3 straight up and 7-1-1 against the spread. Those stats just speak to the fact I can't make Patrick Mahomes an underdog no matter what I say or do in my head. Obviously, Joe Burrow's been fantastic. We saw how dynamic he was. But one thing I want to call out, as good as the Bengals' offensive line was last week, they did not face a defender who is nearly on the same level as Chris Jones. I absolutely expect Chris Jones to make his presence felt in this game. I expect him to get a sack. If Chris Jones doesn't get a sack in this game, easy, Bengals win, not a problem. But I think he's going to be a factor, especially they talked about it on the broadcast last week, how the Chiefs use him. Steve Spagnuolo uses him in a variety of ways where they actually line him up on the defensive line to try to create mismatches, create opportunities to get into gaps and get towards the quarterback. I think he's going to have a good game. However, because of the injury and maybe most importantly, this is a game in which I know people have talked about it all year, but you will miss Tyreek Hill. You may become too one-dimensional in looking for Travis Kelce. You have to be balanced if you're the Chiefs. That really doesn't fall under Andy Reid's jurisdiction or history of play calling. So for a number of reasons, I am conflicted. But in this early line betting show from Butt Fumble Sports, the Butt Fumble Sports pick for this game is Cincinnati on the money line, Kansas City +4 after I buy a 1.5. And much like the two of you, I love the under in this game. I gave out a number of trends at the beginning of this segment where I talked about how they all lean towards the under. I like the under in both the games this weekend, but I really like the under in this game because I think the defenses are going to play slightly better than a lot of people expect. But that said, as Adam mentioned, I do think there are some good player prop bets on Travis Kelce, Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco, and on the other side, Jamar Chase total receptions has been a cashing ticket so consistently, you might as well put the money in your pocket. I feel good about that one as well. Curious to know what the over-under will be on passing attempts for Joe Burrow. I expect that offense to be a little bit more balanced than what we saw early in the game last week. But that said, I think this is going to be a great matchup. But one more time, the early betting line picks for Butt Fumble Sports are Cincinnati on the money line, Kansas City +4 after you buy a 1.5, and the under after you buy a 1.5. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. And if you want to get our picks closer to game time, go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, sign up for the free newsletter. In that newsletter, you get all of our picks all in one place, as well as the gambling trends and game notes that go with it. So whether you agree with our picks or not, we're giving you the information. We do the work. You get the information, and that way you can make an informed decision about the bet you want to make. Adam, what are your follow-up thoughts on this one?
Yeah, real quick, I have a lot of props here up right here. Pass completions for Joe Burrow, over 24.5 is a -122. And pass attempts, Joe Burrow, over 37.5 is a -108.
Yeah, see that I don't feel comfortable betting on that right now. Early on, I was thinking maybe go with the under, but I'm kind of holding back on that. But I'm curious to know where his stats come out because I think recency bias is going to play a factor in the betting opportunities here. I think what we saw from Joe Burrow last weekend, I think his under stats or his under totals might be a better play, where Patrick Mahomes, he might be more effective than what the betting lines will say. So I would look towards maybe some of his unders or some of his overs rather. Have another member joining us from the audience, EDP 445. EDP, what are your thoughts on this game between the Bengals and Chiefs?
I think you got my name wrong. It's DeAndre Chang.
Okay, go for it, man. Oh, my bad. DeAndre Chang, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, I think this is going to be a close game. You know, we got the Chiefs, but whenever time you play a team like the Bengals, especially Joe Burrow, I think Burrow always has Mahomes' number, so I'm staying with my guns. I'm going with the Bengals. Let's make it 4-0 against Mahomes.
I like the take. Appreciate you joining us. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports, DeAndre, on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. and at Sports Fumble on
Yeah.
Twitter.
I think I'm already following you.
That's awesome. I certainly appreciate it. Now we are going to do, now that we've covered our picks, there are a couple more topics that are unrelated to teams that are currently in the playoffs that I did want to run through with all you guys to know what you guys think of these topics. So again, this is a more open forum conversation, not gambling picks for this weekend's games, but more looking forward to the offseason. We'll obviously start with Adam, and then we'll go elope and go around. The first question is, it is rumored that Aaron Rodgers is obviously out there on the trade market. One of the teams that's being talked about quite frequently is the New York Jets. I put out a rant video about that a couple days ago, in which I really believe that's a perfect fit. But according to reports, the Packers want 2 first-round picks in exchange for Aaron Rodgers. They are only willing to trade Rodgers to an AFC team. Adam, I know this is a tough one for you to talk about with the Packers so close to your heart. But 1, do you think Aaron Rodgers has played his last game for the Packers? And 2, do you think the Jets are the right fit? And do you think 2 first-round picks is an appropriate amount, or do you think that's asking for too much?
Okay, we have a couple layers here with Rodgers in Green Bay. So the first thing is yes, 2 first-round picks is too much that Gutekunst is asking. And I think the reason he's asking is because he missed the boat on the trade to Denver that Seattle ended up taking by trading Russell Wilson. That could have been Green Bay's haul of all those draft choices and offloading Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah, I think he's trying to do a little bit of damage control, asking for a lot, which I don't think he's going to get. I do believe you have to trade Aaron Rodgers this year. Here's the thing. He's going to be $50 million against the cap. You're going to have to pick up the 5th-year option on Jordan Love. So now you're going to pay $10 million to Jordan Love to sit one more year on the bench, and then try to work out a contract to re-sign with him, knowing that Rodgers is definitely going to be done after this year. I think it's time to move on. It's time to cut the cord and move on. I think the Jets is a good spot for him. I don't think so. I think a good spot for him would be a team like Tennessee, where you put an offensive line around him in a running game and get a receiver or two. He needs a lot of help. He needs a big offensive line and a running game. Yeah, you've seen the decline this year with his accuracy. You've seen the decline in his play this year. What will they do? I'm not sure. An article just came out about 2 hours ago. I was flipping through, and Rodgers now came out and said he is possibly opening to restructure his contract. So that's another layer into this thing. So now if he's going to have the ability to restructure that $50 million he's due this year, then there's a possibility he can come back for one more year with Green Bay. But at the same time, are you going to pay a backup quarterback $10 million to sit there and wait? You almost have to cut the losses here, trade what you can get for Rodgers, which I think you probably could get a first round, maybe a first and a fourth for him. But I think it's time for Love to step in and see what you have. Give him the reins of the team. Let LaFleur coach a team without Aaron Rodgers. Let him be the coach of the team, since we know he hasn't been, because Aaron Rodgers has ruled the roost for the last 2 years in Green Bay, and see what you have in Love. And I think it's time to move on for Rodgers. But to answer your question, why 2 first-round picks is crazy. Did he play his last football game in Green Bay? I believe so, but this latest article about him restructuring his contract could change things in Green Bay.
Lope, what are your thoughts on the future of Aaron Rodgers, either in Green Bay or somewhere else?
I like the move to the Jets. I think that obviously teams are going to be a little bit more cautious after the Russell Wilson trade, but if you're the Jets and you're looking at Josh Allen and the Patriots with Mac Jones and now Bill O'Brien maybe coaching them, and what the Dolphins have done, and Tua possibly coming back, there's no way you can look at that and say you're going to be able to compete for the division without a quarterback. Obviously, they've kind of already moved on and away from Zach Wilson. It fits because the Jets players, and especially their good offensive players, are all young and don't need paid. Breece Hall's going to come back. There's this running game. Wilson's a good wide receiver for him. And Saleh can really focus on the defense, and it will kind of be Aaron Rodgers' offense to roam. So I think that's a safe thing. Whether the Jets are willing to pay for that, I'm unsure, but I think that's the best spot. I don't know how you can run this back in Green Bay. It was quite awful, and I know they were lucky to come down to having a chance to be in the playoffs in the last game, but it was pretty bad. And I think will he play, will he not committed to the off season, not really committed to the preseason, has kind of become too much for most Green Bay, and they kind of feel like they're being held hostage. So I think they're ready to move on too. And the NFC North is not nearly as daunting. I think the Packers could still be competitive against the Bears, Lions, and Vikings with Jordan Love to an extent.
DeAndre, what are your thoughts on the future of Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, after this news, I was kind of shocked. But if I'm the Raiders, if I'm, Dave Ziegler, Josh McDaniels, I'm calling the Packers up immediately after today, and I'm offering you Derek Carr a second or third, possibly a first at most, but Derek Carr and a first for Rodgers. Get Adams and Rodgers reunited in Vegas. That could be a solid contending team for possibly a Super Bowl run.
My thoughts obviously are I think the Jets would be a perfect fit. They have the offensive linemen. Obviously, they could add through the draft, even if it's not first round picks. They have the draft capital to go get them. They have a star wide receiver to pair with him because Garrett Wilson is a stud. And that said, they have a top 5, top 10 defense. So I could see Aaron Rodgers being a perfect fit. And beyond that, Aaron Rodgers goes from the biggest little franchise in professional sports in the Green Bay Packers to maybe the biggest little franchise or the small, the inverse in the New York Jets, a franchise that has a massive market but has underperformed and is still competing with the Giants and with the Bills for attention in the New York marketplace. Aaron Rodgers would cut through that like a hot knife through cold butter. I would really expect him to flourish here, whether it's in deals, broadcasting, or numerous other ways. I think that Aaron Rodgers in New York makes way too much sense for me. Obviously, we're hearing about other places, whether it is Vegas, Miami, or even the Indianapolis Colts, who rumors are willing to make another trade to get in another older white guy quarterback to see if it's another good fit. But for a number of reasons, I just don't think that the Colts are the right place. The only one that makes sense to me when it comes to Rodgers is the New York Jets. Obviously, Miami sounds good, but I actually don't think that they have a good team built around there. And they don't have the draft capital because the Brian Flores situation last year, they lose their first-round pick this year. So it require, I believe, too much draft capital for them to be able to go make that move. But that said, I do believe Aaron Rodgers has played his last game for the Green Bay Packers. And I felt like this has been brewing for some time. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. This guy has been a one-man soap opera for a number of years. And if there's anything about the people from Green Bay, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, these are people who just like hard workers, people who do their job and don't make a lot of stink about it. And I feel like I've heard Aaron Rodgers talk about himself, his ego, what he wants, whether he's an MVP, who's letting him down, which players he's willing to play with. I've just heard way too much drama from him. And at some point, don't you think the good people of Wisconsin are ready to just ship him out like a bad piece of cheese? I feel like we've finally hit that point. Adam, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it. I think he's worn on his welcome here. Brett Favre, aside from what has happened the last couple of years with him off the field here and some of the things he's been in dealings, Brett Favre was beloved, right? Because he was a hard worker. He played hurt. It didn't matter what it was. He was going to be on the football field. And, Wisconsin and, is a blue collar state, right? We're just hard workers and we love our football team in Green Bay. And the thing with Rodgers over the years, and I think hit the nail on the head, he's turned into kind of a prima donna and a diva, and it's a, hey, look at me type situation. He held, to Lope's point, he held the organization hostage. He became bigger than the G in the side of the helmet. And that's not what it should be in Green Bay, right? You're not bigger than the G in the side of the helmet. He just doesn't fit the mold. And the one thing to think about with him coming out now and mentioning restructure, Brett Favre restructured his contract, much less Tom Brady did two to three times to keep guys on the football team, to get other guys paid because he knew he needed them around there to be successful. Aaron Rodgers would never do that. And the only reason I think that he floated this restructure out there is because he has everything he wants in Green Bay. He has complete control. He is the coach of the football team. He runs the organization. And if he leaves and goes somewhere else, if he goes to the Jets, like you said, which could be a good fit, or he goes to Tennessee or goes to Las Vegas, he's not going to run the organization.
See, that I don't agree with. In Vegas, I would agree with that. I think in New York, in part because Robert Saleh is a defensive coach, I actually think, and keep in mind, they've already been interviewing Nathaniel Hackett. So to me, there would be a lot of seamless transition in which Aaron Rodgers would be kind of the head honcho for that team, just to give someone else an opportunity. DeAndre, what are your thoughts on Rodgers and Packers and what Adam just said?
Yeah, I just can't see him going to the Jets. Garrett Wilson is about your best weapon out there when you can go to the Raiders. Jacobs, Adams, Waller, Renfro. Not to mention you got that Josh McDaniels. I think he's going to actually thrive this year with this quarterback that he trades good for. He's got a solid defense. He really didn't have a defense in Green Bay, this past season. And to say that he wants to go to the Jets, he's got to agree to this trade. They can't just automatically
No,
ship him out.
that's not true. He does not have a no trade clause. So actually, Aaron Rodgers does not have to agree to this trade. He actually is vulnerable.
He could actually pick where he wants to go, like force his way out. He could go to Vegas for all we
know. No, he can actually. Aaron Rodgers does not have the control that you're saying. In his contract that he signed last year, he does not have the language where he can dictate this. If the Packers wanted to move him, Rodgers would be on the move. Rodgers does not have the legal language to protect himself.
He could just sit out this entire season, though.
That's true. That I will give you. Aaron Rodgers could absolutely retire. He could sit out. So if you're saying that, in that way, he does have the leverage. The only piece about that I would counter is when you have $50 million staring you in the face, are you going to sit out? Maybe. Aaron Rodgers has made a lot of money. One additional note on your point, DeAndre. So we just got a report. Our great broadcast producer, Bleese, who's on here. Make sure you follow Bleese at NFT. Or at Bleese NFT. He just sent me a report that the Raiders are potentially considering moving Waller and Renfro, that McDaniels has kind of made it known, as well as Dave Ziegler, the GM, that those kind of aren't their guys. They'd like to bring in their guys. So they're actually open to some trades. So
do you have the sources?
We do.
Post them?
We do have the sources.
I thought that was fake news at first. I didn't know if it was a real account posting that.
So that's NFL Don Kleeman, who's actually a pretty reliable source. Teams around the league expect the Raiders to aggressively tweak their roster, and that includes Josh McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler getting, quote-unquote, their own guys, end quote, while moving on from team veterans.
Yeah,
NFL
you
teams
can't trust Dov Kleiman. Like, that's like such a fake account. It look good because it's verified, but you cannot trust that account. I've got screwed by that account so many times in the past years.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm still curious to see how it plays out. I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders move on from him. I'm not as big on Waller and Renfro as I was a few years ago, only because they have difficulty staying healthy. I love them when they're healthy, but I could understand Josh McDaniels and the GM. Something a head coach and a GM like to do is kind of assemble the roster in their own vision. But that said, to your point, DeAndre, I do think the Raiders would be a great fit for Rodgers because the continuity he would immediately have, the comfort he has with Devontae Adams. The bigger question for me is, would the Raiders rather have Rodgers, where they have to trade draft capital, or do they want to just make a push, go after Tom Brady? Obviously, Tom Brady's available without having to give up the capital. Which option would be preferable? If I'm the Raiders, I think I prefer Brady. That's obviously if Brady doesn't retire. But I think
you don't
that
have
does
to give
play
up
a
anything.
factor.
You just sign the dude. That's pretty easy.
This is my point, and that's why I think the Raiders are a good fit. But to me, they're probably the second or third best option for Rodgers, which probably extends it out a little bit more, gives a bit more possibility to some other teams.
Yeah, it just wouldn't make any sense, though. If they did get Brady, why would they trade Waller and Renfro? That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm kind of lost there.
Good point. One other thing I wanted to bring up in our final session before we end the show, one other note, and this has to do with a wide receiver who's supposedly been put out on the market. Curious to know what everyone thinks about this one. The Arizona Cardinals are supposedly shopping DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to get a new head coach, a new general manager, but they're already letting it out there that they'd be willing to move DeAndre Hopkins, who wants to address his contract. The two teams that are reportedly very interested, no surprise here, are the Baltimore Ravens and the New England Patriots. The Patriots just made a move today that, whether it helps or hurts them, there is some history here. They hire Bill O'Brien as their offensive coordinator. Of course, Bill O'Brien has a history with DeAndre Hopkins from their time in Houston together. Don't know, again, if that helps or hurts the situation. But again, we'll go around on this one. On this one, we'll start with Lope. Lope, do you think DeAndre Hopkins gets traded, and where do you think he ultimately lands?
I think it's terrible if the Cardinals can't find a way to keep him with Kyler Murray. But if they think that they need more players and picks and aren't willing to pay him, obviously those two teams are definitely a fit. I think that New England would probably be a little bit more promising for DeAndre Hopkins. I think the Ravens are kind of built around the run. Maybe they're going to do things differently with Greg Roman stepping down, but it seems to be like it's going to be more. I think whoever coaches that offense is going to be more in an option heavy run, short passes, and I think you can be a little bit more creative in New England and pass it. So I think that would be the better fit, but I think it's a bad move if the Cardinals cannot find a way to keep him, because there isn't a whole lot of him, and he's one of the top 3, top 5 wide receivers in the league.
Adam, what are your thoughts? Is DeAndre Hopkins wearing a different uniform at the start of the 2023 regular season?
Yeah, I agree with Lope. I think Arizona needs to find a way to keep him with the Cardinals. If he does get traded, I think it depends if Lamar Jackson gets signed or not. Obviously, that Baltimore Ravens wide receiving core and Duvernay is pretty, Demarcus Robinson, but you got, Sammy Watkins. I mean, it's just pretty pathetic. New England's wide receiver core obviously isn't the greatest either. They got a couple young guys there, but I think wherever Hopkins goes, if he does get traded to a team, I think he could be a good asset. I mean, the Packers, for example, if they, depending what Arizona asks for him, if he comes in and play with a team like the Packers with Watson and Dobbs and a lot of these young wide receivers, he would be a great veteran presence that still can play football. But I'm with Lope. I think Arizona needs to find a way to get that done and keep him in Arizona. That's ultimately the best.
DeAndre, where do you have DeAndre Hopkins going this offseason?
Yeah, this might shock a little people, but DeAndre Hopkins to the Packers, why not? Why not let, keep Rodgers for another few years, get him his guy, maybe his next Devontae Adams, keep him there, maybe go on a playoff run, little playoff run, maybe to the conference titles. We don't know, but I think they need to get Aaron Rodgers a receiver real quick before he leaves, because this might be his last year or possibly his last offseason, because he might leave this season.
So for me, DeAndre Hopkins, they do need to move on from him. I love him, by the way. I think he's one of my favorite receivers in the league. Unbelievable hands. Despite some of the mistakes that he had this year, like that fumble against the Patriots, he delivers more for a team week in, week out than I think more than almost any other receiver. Obviously, they're the Justin Jeffersons, Jamar Chases, Stefon Diggs of the world, but I think DeAndre Hopkins is right on the fringes of that. If he had played a full season with Kyler Murray, I think he'd be, consistently in that top 3, top 5 class like he has been for the past few years. I think they need to move on from him because I think the Arizona Cardinals are in a complete rebuild mode. Kyler Murray being out, at least for the start of next year, I think is going to impact things. Do you really want to pay DeAndre Hopkins for a season in which you're probably not going to make the playoffs? You're not even going to have your starting quarterback for training camp and maybe for the start of the season. I would move on from him. I would trade him, get some picks, get out of that contract, and try and rebuild in the vision of whatever the new GM and head coach are. But as for the places he could land, the New England Patriots could desperately use him. Mac Jones needs a superstar wide receiver, I think more than almost any other quarterback in the league. And given they're going to get some money off the books, Nelson Aguilar, I believe, is a free agent. I believe there's another one that I'm missing here that's a free agent on their wide receiver list. But the whole point is they could take some of that money off the books. Obviously, it would require some draft capital. But given the history of the Patriots drafting at wide receiver, I'd much rather the Patriots look for a wide receiver in a trade rather than dipping into the draft and looking for N'Keal Harry 2.0. But the Baltimore Ravens are the most obvious place for me. They're going to franchise tag Lamar Jackson. Harbaugh pretty much said that with there's 200% chance that he's back. There's no way in my mind that the Baltimore Ravens aren't led by Lamar Jackson next year. And for maybe that reason alone, they can kind of see their window with Lamar Jackson closing as rapidly as any other team is right now in the NFL. To take advantage of that window, they need to go after a star wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins makes a lot of sense, brings a brand new level of versatility and opportunity to that offense. They moved on from Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator so they could bring in a pass-focused OC, really open up the offense for Lamar Jackson. I think it doesn't just make a lot of sense. I think it makes the most sense of any scenario. So if I'm the Baltimore Ravens, I am calling the Cardinals every single day and making sure that I secure the trade rights to DeAndre Hopkins over the next few weeks. Appreciate all of you joining us for this early line betting show. Make sure you follow Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Butt Fumble Sports is our handle. And of course, if you want to get all of our gambling picks as well as our game notes and gambling trends all in one place, go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. While you're there, sign up for the free newsletter. In that newsletter, you get all of our picks consolidated in one place, as well as the research that goes in behind it. So whether you agree with our picks or disagree, you have the information to make a smart pick to make sure you cash your tickets. Appreciate all of you joining us. It's been an incredible 21 weeks of talking football with you. I can't believe that we're closing in on the final 3 football games of the NFL season. But obviously, as always, I want to give a big shout out to the Butt Fumble Sports team, everyone behind the scenes that makes it happen. Before I get to our contributors, I want to start with our head of production. Blease, you do an unbelievable job. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Make sure you follow him. He's one of the most creative, artistic people around. Make sure you follow him at Blease NFT. That's at BLEACE NFT. Unbelievably brilliant and creative. Make sure you give him a follow. As for our content contributors who give their analysis and spend so much time trying to make you smarter for your NFL Sunday, make sure you follow Adam. That's at SpotterAJ. At SPOTTERAJ, does an unbelievable job for us. Thank you so much, Adam. And of course, Lope, that's at JLopedawg, at JLOPEDAWG. Lope, appreciate you always giving your analysis and making time for us. You guys are an unbelievable group. I so appreciate you making the time and committing as much enthusiasm, passion, and intelligence to this every week. I hope our listeners and our followers appreciate it as much. Make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. We will be going live on TikTok Live and on YouTube throughout the week to answer your questions around the NFC and AFC Championship games, trying to hand out a lot of winning tickets, whether it's game picks, total plays, or player prop bets. We'll be putting out a lot of information throughout the week, so make sure you follow us at Butt Fumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And once again, go to our website, buttfumblesports.com, sign up for that free newsletter. That free newsletter comes out Friday morning with all of our picks, analysis, and all the gambling trends you need to cash in on the AFC and NFC Championship games on Sunday. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you're following us. Can't wait to do this again for the Super Bowl. But until then, good luck on your bets, and we'll talk to you soon.